So I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker on the panel, Virginia Jansen, who is a graduate student in musicology at the University of California, Davis. Her research focuses on classical music in the 19th and 20th century United States, where she explores issues of identity, intertextuality, and revival. Please help me welcome her.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. I want to echo all the thanks for the organizers and the amazing presenters so far. I'm excited to hear more in the next day and to the rest of this panel. I'm presenting Strife and Tribulation, Refiguring Gender and Race in America's Golden Age of Musical Theater through the Women of Schmigadoon. So here I go. Fade in on a postcard set against a red gingham background. A grand orchestral overture plays, and big old-timey red letters read Schmigadoon. Does this look familiar to anyone? The 1947 musical Brigadoon by Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe tells the story of two American tourists who end up in a magical Scottish village that only appears once every 100 years. Well, it hasn't been 100 years, but in 2021, Apple TV Plus released what many consider to be a remaking of Brigadoon, the 6-episode first season of the TV show Schmigadoon, which was created by Cinco Paul and Ken Dario. After Lerner and Lowe's musical and the subsequent 1954 film version, the word Brigadoon is often used to refer to a place unaffected by time. So what does it mean to go back to such a place? Our story begins with Melissa and Josh, two Manhattan doctors in a stagnating relationship. Melissa is a romantic, as represented by her obsession with Golden Age movie musicals. Josh, not so much. On a couple's retreat in the woods, they get lost and stumble upon a bridge. The scenery changes from gray and rainy to bright colors and blue skies, and they are soon greeted by a group of townsfolk in clothing reminiscent of early 20th century small-town America, who announce, in song, that they have entered Schmigadoon. While Schmigadoon's broader frame, two people stuck in a magical place, mimics that of Brigadoon, its unending references span across specific musicals and tropes of the Golden Age of American musical theater, often through parody. In this paper, I explore Schmigadoon as a potential framework for negotiating the fraught ideals of the Golden Age with its continued relevance, specifically through Schmigadoon's representation of race and gender. In the lyrics of the series' first musical number, which references eponymous Golden Age numbers like Oklahoma from Oklahoma and Camelot from Camelot, the rigid gender roles of Schmigadoon, and in turn those of the Golden Age, are established. The townsfolk sing that Schmigadoon is a place
where a man can dream so big and wide, and the gal can be there with mine inside.
In contrast, the racial politics of Schmigadoon are not directly addressed by the townsfolk. Melissa and Josh, an interracial couple, soon meet our villain, Mildred Layton, who described them as, quote, exotic. After this comment, Melissa attempts to convince Josh that Schmigadoon, well, which at this point they think is some sort of tourist attraction, is kind of modern. You saw the ensemble, it's colorblind casting, end quote. And Josh replies that it seems like Layton, quote, doesn't like their colorblind casting. In this way, Josh and Melissa interact with the town of Schmigadoon and the people who live there on multiple levels. They act as an audience, but also as community members, and to us, as fellow cast members of the show we are watching. How do these multivalent layers of audience and performance position Schmigadoon? I work with two frameworks, Schmigadoon as reworking and Schmigadoon as revival. Vida Midgelo defines reworkings as, quote, hybrid palimpsestuous texts that evoke a particularly bi-directional gaze as they exist within a double frame, simultaneously evoking and questioning their sources. Midgelo is specifically discussing dance pieces that reference and therefore rework canonic ballets, but this key element of bidirectionality can certainly apply to Schmigadoon, which relies on extensive references to Golden Age musicals, but also continuously points out their flaws through its parodic framing. Midglow's portmanteau, palimpsestuous, invites us to think about the traces of those flaws Schmigadoon bears, and therefore how Schmigadoon and its Golden Age influences enter into an incestuous relationship of sorts in that the two are perhaps more alike than we're comfortable admitting. In thinking of Schmigadoon as revival, I turn towards Brian Van Devender's ideas of revivals as pedagogical intervention. He argues that, quote, studying musicals in revival necessarily broadens musical theater's historical narrative by decentralizing a given musical's creators and original production, granting legitimacy to its subsequent productions, and acknowledging the contributions of the theater artists who work almost exclusively in revivals. Thinking about the Golden Age in and through revival shifts our temporality. It forces us to reckon with the fact that we did not leave the problematics of the Golden Age in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. They reverberate with every revival and must be dealt with care, especially considering how they can affect those theater artists who work in revivals and their audiences. Van Devender argues that a revival-based approach encourages a careful balancing of affection and analysis. I love this show, and my desire to analyze it goes hand in hand with that love. Schmigadoon's premise also rests on Melissa's love of the Golden Age, despite her disgust with many of its flaws, and as a TV series, it relies on its audience both loving and being critical of the Golden Age. Speaking of what I love about Schmigadoon, this brings me to the women of Schmigadoon. In this paper, I'm going to focus on 4 of the main women characters in the town of Schmigadoon: Betsy McDonough, Emma Tate, Florence Menlove, and of course, Mildred Layton. I view the women of Schmigadoon within their own characterizations, but also through the eyes of the often imperfect stand-in for the contemporary woman musical theater goer, Melissa. Through the relationships between Melissa and these women, we can parse connections to how the contemporary musical theater community reworks the Golden Age within revivals. We meet Betsy McDonough, played by Dove Cameron, indirectly through the show's first number.
Farmer McDonough craved a son, but he had daughters, every one. Touch him and you'll answer to my gun.
As the setting of Schmigadoon is established, Betsy, a main character of the show, is only introduced via her father. After Melissa and Josh break up, Josh is searching for the true love he needs to find in order to leave Schmigadoon, and Betsy invites him to the town's picnic basket auction, which is, of course, reminiscent of the basket auction in Oklahoma. Melissa finds out and is horrified, not only by him moving on so quickly, but by the concept of an auction where, quote, men are bidding on women like livestock, end quote. Josh argues that he, quote, is not suggesting this for the actual world, but since we're both stuck in this world, maybe you should make your own basket, end quote. Similarly, musical theater artists can feel stuck in an antiquated world through the source material of a Golden Age musical they interact with via revival. And here we see 2 methods of dealing with that world: accepting it, as Josh does, or resisting and seeking to change it, as Melissa does. In her scene with Josh, after he wins her basket, Betsy sings of waiting until she's a bride to be intimate, while making explicit gestures with the various food in her picnic basket. And we see how Betsy is acting within rigid Golden Age tropes for women, representing a character like Ado Annie from Oklahoma, known for being overly sexual. Paul and Cameron discussed this scene and described Betsy as, quote, an idea rather than a woman. End quote. She's a parody of a Golden Age trope, but does that parody address the trope or reify it? Throughout their conversation, Josh keeps trying to figure out how old Betsy is, a clear nod to both inappropriate age gaps in relationships in Golden Age musicals and the fact that adult actresses often played teenage girls during that time period. Despite Betsy's much younger age, Josh still attempts to leave Schmigadoon with her, but the magical bridge does not let them. So, even as Josh buys into a problematic Golden Age archetype, the show makes a point that this relationship is not appropriate in the multi-layered timeline of Schmigadoon, which carries a latent critique of its inappropriateness in the Golden Age itself. Josh's next love interest is Emma Tate, played by Ariana DeBose, who is based on another Golden Age trope, the unmarried independent woman, the spinster, a la Marian the Librarian from Meredith Willson's The Music Man. In the first number, the townspeople sing that
our school marm is Emma Tate. She helps our kids to punctuate. Still unmarried at 28.
To which Melissa and Josh react with confusion and even disgust. In this way, Emma exists out of time, in that she is too progressive for the Golden Age standards, and yet viewed as part of that era by Melissa and Josh. After Betsy and Josh's relationship, if we can call it that, falls apart, Josh gets a job fixing up the schoolhouse to have a place to stay, and Emma is resistant to his charms. While working, Josh tries to give up on something, and in response, Emma leads the children in a song that emphasizes the need to always try your best and follow through on what you do, and there's some lyrics there. In this way, a character based on Golden Age tropes teaches our modern character a lesson on values and morals, inverting the idea that contemporary perspectives only serve to change Golden Age material. This is not to say that the Golden Age represents some sort of bastion of morals, it certainly does not, but it reminds us of one of the reasons why the Golden Age gets revived and invites us to think reflexively about revival and the latent potential in Golden Age material to engage with contemporary ideas. In this case, Josh helps Emma's brother Carson open up, and after he finds out that Carson is actually Emma's son that she had outside of marriage, he is accepting and helps them heal their relationship. And one of many plot lines where Josh's and Melissa's contemporary perspectives help Schmigadoonians break out of the rigid, discriminatory tropes that govern their society. But in this case, without Emma's influence on Josh, he would not have enacted that change, reflecting the bidirectionality Midgelow discussed. Perhaps the least known of the four women I'm focusing on is Florence Menlove, played by Anne Harada, who, in contrast to the other three, is not mentioned or even gestured towards in the opening song. Florence is the wife of the mayor of Schmigadoon, who, in case you didn't already figure it out from his last name, is a closeted gay man, pictured here with his love interest, Reverend Layton. While Menlove's sexuality is hinted at in previous songs, it is first articulated in the song Florence sings to Melissa. Let's listen to a bit now.
Some men stumble home at dark, want dinner and dessert. Other men have eyes that spark at every passing skirt. But my man loves cooking. I've never caught him looking at other gals more young, petite, or fine. He's a queer one, that man, oh my.
This was literally me in high school.
So this song references those classic Golden Age songs where a female main character excuses the violent behavior of her male love interest, such as What's the Use of Wonderin' from Rodgers and Hammerstein's Carousel. It's a powerful reworking to take the structure of songs that romanticize abusive behavior and turn it into a critique of compulsive heterosexuality. When Melissa encourages Mayor Menlove to be open about who he is, he comes out to the whole town, and after difficulties we'll discuss in a moment, he is accepted. In another reworking of the Golden Age, Schmigadoon imagines a world where the queer-coded characters of Golden Age musicals were able to come out of the closet and eventually be accepted. But here I'm talking about the women, and in this song, Florence is the butt of the joke based on Melissa's contemporary perspective. While Melissa listens to Florence and looks around the room at the homoerotic art, she makes sympathetic quips such as what we heard here. This was literally me in high school. It again speaks to the continued relevance of the Golden Age that Melissa finds this connection, but through it all, I wonder, who is Florence? While not every character is a main character, a woman character with no conceivable personality outside of her husband is true to the Golden Age tropes that reduce women to their male love interest, rather than remaking them. As promised, let's return to the discrimination that Mayor Menlove faced after he came out. From the first song, Mildred Layton, played by Kristen Chenoweth, represents the Golden Age's resistance to change. She sings that,
But if Schmigadoon is to endure, it must be kept pristine and pure. This land on which our fathers trod must ever obey the laws of God.
Pictured here with her fellow Mothers Against the Future, Mildred continuously attacks Melissa and Josh throughout their time in Schmigadoon. As their influence begins to be felt throughout Schmigadoon, through the mayor coming out and eventually Emma revealing that Carson is her son, Mildred blames Melissa and Josh, brandishing them outsiders in a patter song highly reminiscent of Trouble from The Music Man. Let's listen to a bit now.
I tell you, things have changed ever since those two outsiders
waltzed in with their big city ways and their newfangled ideas, promiscuity and depravity. Interlopers interloping with parts colder than the hinges of hell. Of course, the two of them arrived unmarried, brimming with lust, want to share a bed. Then the praise and display at the basket auction. Now the mayor's out, proclaiming his perversions. At the root of it all are two strangers who've never cracked a Bible in their life. And that's gonna lead to tribulation and strife.
While Mildred explicitly highlights Melissa and Josh's unmarried status, she also continuously dog whistles towards their racial identities, such as through an association with urbanity, and later in the song when she asserts that she, quote, has nothing against outsiders, provided they're the right kind of people, the kind of people that look and talk and act like us. Which begs the question, what do Schmigadoonians look and talk and act like? It was established early in the series that Schmigadoon's ensemble features colorblind casting, but Mildred and her cohort, those most stringently attached to Golden Age ideologies, all appear to be white. Later on in the song, Mildred laments that,
Oh, we've got strife. And tribulation. And not to mention miscegenation.
That sounds bad.
by casually inserting the derogatory term for interracial relationships to a diverse ensemble that then replies, that sounds bad, Schmigadoon makes a joke of the structural racism that permeated daily life in the United States in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s for people of color, especially the physical violence against black men based on racist fears of miscegenation. It ignores the very real ways structural racism affected the musical theater industry during the Golden Age, and it also just doesn't make sense. Mayor Menlove and Florence are in an interracial relationship, as well as another Schmigadoonian couple, Dr. Lopez and Countess von Blurkum. So, what are the racial politics of Schmigadoon? Perhaps this moment gestures towards the fact that many of the Americana-style Golden Age musicals which Schmigadoon primarily references do not directly address race, but are rather built on a bedrock of exclusion and musical appropriation. However, it also reveals a hesitancy in Schmigadoon to make a sustained critique about representations of race in the Golden Age in comparison to its continual and very direct engagement with arguments about gender. This specific issue, and the song more broadly, articulates how when the world of the Golden Age and progressive and contemporary musical theater audiences and practitioners come into contact, there is often some strife and tribulation. Rather than the stoking and capitalizing on discrimination for political gain that Mildred does, there is an opportunity to use the inherent friction to remake Golden Age source material to address contemporary issues. When viewed through this lens, Mildred's proclamation of miscegenation to a confused audience could connect to the systemic racism still facing this country today, as well as a far-right pipeline on social media that pushes people towards discrimination before they even might know what the words they are saying mean. While Schmigadoon's songs take us in different directions, the broader love story pushes onward, and by the final episode, Melissa and Josh realize that they truly love each other, at the same time as the contentious mayor's race, of course. The Schmigadoonians turn against Mildred and accept Mayor Menlove and Emma Carson for who they are, and even Mildred eventually comes around after Melissa offers her a hand. In the final number of the show, the Schmigadoonians sing that.
This is how we change, reimagine, rearrange, see ourselves through others' eyes, re-examine, realize.
The Schmigadoonians share my propensity for re-words and describe how they have reimagined, rearranged, re-examined, and realized their world since Melissa and Josh have entered it, which ultimately leads to the change that art can inspire. However, in this last song, we leave the Golden Age musical idioms and move towards that of the next era, specifically a Sondheim-like sound. This sonic evolution sends the message that the Golden Age cannot change. We must go on to the next era. What implications does this have on Golden Age revivals? To think about this question, I implore another trusty reword, reenactment. In her study of American Civil War reenactment, Rebecca Schneider proposes that, quote, reenactment troubles linear temporality by offering at least the suggestion of recurrence or return, even if the practice is peppered with its own ongoing incompletion, end quote. By thinking of Schmigadoon as reenactment, we can move towards a destabilization of Golden Age source material. What is the Golden Age in Schmigadoon? Its musical characteristics, the turn of the century costumes, the rampant discrimination in its society. Through reworking, we have already thought about Schmigadoon as a hybrid text, not completely of the Golden Age, but also not completely of our contemporary time. Reenactment simultaneously pushes us further forward and pulls us further back. If Schmigadoon reenacts the Golden Age, it presents the possibility that we can actually return to and remake the Golden Age. With this troubled temporality in mind, moving towards the musical idiom that follows the Golden Age, while it leaves some questions unanswered, some things incomplete, also empowers revival's ability to acknowledge and repair the harms of previous eras of musical theater. For these women, Schmigadoon is not a place unaffected by time, as Brigadoon is presumed to be. Perhaps we can think about the schma in Schmigadoon as smudging or schmudging temporality, and embrace its often messy and imperfect friction as a space for new possibilities, both of our conception of musical theater's past and its future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your wonderful paper. I'm wondering, you have all these re-words, and one that came to mind for me also was remediation, that we're taking sort of stage tropes and we're also then filtering them through the lens of television, and I wonder how that might inflect the way Schmigadoon is operating, as well as taking something from one medium and remediating it, if that factors in.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's an interesting question of liveness, because we're watching, at least at the beginning, when they think they're watching a performance, we're watching Melissa and Josh watch a live performance, and then they realize that it's not a performance, and then we are all watching them the whole time. And I think there's these references to that only make sense if you know the musicals, right? So it's relying on that, but I think a lot of the references they make are primarily to the film musicals, so it is kind of already that built-in remediation of the stage to the film. So yeah, I need to think more about that, but thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the audience? Yes, please, let me bring you.
Thank you for that. Is this on? Hello? Yep. Yeah? Okay, great. I am a mother against the future. I'm wondering if your study includes like some of the intertextual casting choices of the show. And I'll just share that I was excited to watch it with my daughter because she was into The Descendants, the Disney property, and I basically had to turn it off during the picnic scene because it was so inappropriate. In a way that actually isn't funny when your daughter's like 8 or 9, or 10. So so that made me curious about the other intertextual casting choices like Kristen Chenoweth, et cetera.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Thank you. I think your comment speaks to kind of the facade of the Golden Age as colorful and family friendly, but then maybe they're bringing to the fore some of the stuff that was more just gestured towards in the original, and then they are like making it very explicit in the picnic scene. In terms of casting, I know that Ariana DeBose talked about being so excited that she got to play this character because she said she doesn't usually get to play like a Barbara Cook style character, so that this TV show kind of made that possible. And then I think with Kristen Chenoweth, obviously she's so beloved kind of in musical theater in general, and then she plays this evil character, but then maybe people don't think as much about the kind of the darkness of the character, because all the comments under Tribulation on YouTube are about, how amazing Kristen Chenoweth is, and that the scene was filmed in one take and all live. So everyone's like, oh my goodness, Kristen Chenoweth, but I think it offers more to think about than just the amazing actors and actresses who, obviously, it's such an amazing show that I love.
I must be a bad parent because I think my kid was also 10 and he was just all in on it. We're like, whatever. I mean, I feel like we just give up. But I was wondering, because I was also thinking about casting, and I was thinking about the way in which it's like this is the way animated movies are made, but flipped on its head. That they're made for kids, but they're also made for us so we can watch them. So there's stuff in them that we're going to get that they're not going to get. And this is something that could only be made now to some degree, whether because of sensibility or the smallness of an audience that can exist. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on who was this made for? Aside from me.
I know, I feel like it was made for me perfectly. Yeah, I think it's Apple TV Plus in general, and I'm not an expert, but they have all these weird niche shows that they spend probably hundreds of millions of dollars on, and I think a lot of it is made for award seasons, actually, generally, not just Schmigadoon, but the streaming service in general. But yeah, I think it is for the musical theater fan. I think it can be enjoyed by not the musical theater fan, but I feel like the number of references is like that you would be more confused and feel like there's an absurdity to it. I mean, there definitely is if you know the references, but yeah, I think it's for the musical theater fan in us all.
This has been one of the greatest papers, hands down. I love the slides, the modern media examples, and everything. It was great. Terrific. Or as Terry Lardell in Three Little Words would say, terrific. Okay. Anyways, I was like, oh my god, I just realized these characters represent each of these things, and I'm like, It is very much something that could only be made today, I understand. But I'd forgotten about the picnic scene and some other elements, and I'm like, it's not exactly family friendly, but I'm guessing, of course, I mean, I watched it with my mom, and she's watched all these movies with me, and she's had to sit through all those, including Brigadoon. And well, because not everybody in my family loves those things as much as I do. So she got the references, and she was laughing out loud, and so was I, but then I was like, what if I watch it with, say, my dad, who's never really watched any of those things, and he doesn't really, I mean, do you think it's made for everyone or not? I mean, I've been tempted to recommend it to friends and so on, but I'm not sure if they're going to like it or not. So do you think it's for the mass public, or do you think it's just for fans, or do you think it's just a TV show and it should be loved by everyone? What do you think?
I think it can be loved by everyone, but I think, yeah, you might end up more confused than laughing. You might be like, what are all these characters? And it also moves quickly because all of this, there's multiple songs in every episode, and they're telling these different stories, and it's trying to highlight the references to the characters, but it's also telling the broader love story, and it is a little complex, I think, if you don't catch on. But I think anyone could like it. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, even in the title, Schmigadoon relies, to understand what that means, relies on you understanding the reference, right?
Yes.
But there are also, I think, more accessible intertexts that you might put it in conversation with, or ones that a larger audience would be familiar with, like The Wizard of Oz, kind of coming from a different time and a different place and landing somewhere and transforming it, or even, to me, it's very reminiscent of something like Pleasantville. But yeah, I think maybe we have time for one more question.
My question was just about this genre of television vis-a-vis other musical television genres, of which there's not that many. I think this is so not my area of expertise, but I'm curious. I can think of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend off the top of my head, particularly shows that were meant for more than one season, which I think are just such an interesting challenge to musical theater in general. How do you write an open-ended musical show? Musical episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, something like Glee, but how do you see this relating to other televised musical genres?
Thank you. I think Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is probably the best kind of connection because it's parody of all these musical genres, so not one, but there is like a trouble parody in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Cold waters will lead to crack or something like that. I think it is a part of that kind of lineage of Smash and Glee and Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and then the streaming allowing for this even more hyper-specific. And then, of course, I would love to talk about the second season, which Chicago, which takes on the next era, and I actually like that one more than this one. But and then the third season got canceled before it was made, but it was going to be Into the Schmuds. So yeah, I think it's a lot of fun, musical TV shows. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for your wonderful paper. I'm very happy to introduce our second presenter, Kelly Kessler, who is a professor of media and popular culture at DePaul University and author of Broadway in the Box, Television's Lasting Love Affair with the Musical, and Destabilizing the Hollywood Musical, Music, Masculinity, and Mayhem, as well as editor of Gender, Sex, and Sexuality in the Musical, He, She, They Could Have Danced All Night. This presentation springs from a current project which explores the series American Musical Theater and how early American TV's locale and economic model both embraced and failed to preserve the sights and sounds of the Broadway musical's late golden age. Please welcome Kelly.
It's interesting that that show was eventually going to hit a wall of presentism if it kept going, which is something that I'll mention. So, hello. So this seemed like a perfect opportunity to share some of my discoveries and thoughts about Ethel Burns, the largely obscured show she helped create, When working on Broadway in the Box, I was immediately told I needed to connect with Jane Klain, manager of research services at the Paley Center for Media. She would become a friend, an indispensable resource, and an incredibly generous sharer of her labor related to the musical and TV. One of the first things she did was gleefully point me toward a local CBS New York series produced in conjunction with the City of New York Board of Education, American Musical Theater, a series launched in 1959 with the goal of teaching teens about the musical. Right? For me, this research hits the significance of women in musical theater on three rails. One, the show captured, and to a degree preserved, performances and discussions with an array of A-list on down women of the musical. Two, it was rediscovered and preserved by the sheer determination of Jane Klain, once referred to as Paley's quote-unquote intrepid detective in residence, unquote, by Playbill. And three, perhaps most significantly in terms of bringing an underappreciated woman of musical theater to the fore, the work, vision, and strategic or accidental preservation of early American arts television by Ethel Burns, a former New York City music teacher and Board of Ed Broadcast Center employee who essentially moonlighted as a TV producer during her quote-unquote free time in summers. This collection of musical and musical-adjacent ladies helps to illustrate the significance of women of the stage and those who valued their work enough to help preserve it. In 1994, early into her Paley tenure, Jane began receiving inquiries about an early WCBS musical show which had featured New York public high school students. Many of those asking hoped to find a copy of the series to catch a glimpse of their younger selves in the studio audience. For years, she hunted for recordings, searching for and reaching out to anyone connected to the series. She discovered the show's original host, Jim Morse, had kept a couple tapes, and Brooklyn Technical High School, home of the district's broadcast center, had saved some, but they had been destroyed in a flood. After 4 years of searching, she spotted a familiar name in the New York Times obituaries, Ethel Burns. The show's associate producer and creator had passed away at the age of 90. After contacting Burns' estate, Clain discovered that the lifelong New Yorker had in fact been living in the same house in the Bronx for the past 50 years. Burns' attorney provided Clain and some fellow researchers access to the home, where they discovered dozens of boxes filled higgledy-piggledy with documents including thank you letters, Board of Ed memos and reports, CBS memos, scripts, and a treasure trove of tapes of American musical theater. After discovering the historical value of what had been gathering dust in Burns' house, Clain told the New York Times, quote, "I'm not a spiritual person, but I felt she was looking down." This discovery, the cache of tapes Paley was able to digitize, the show's materials, and the communication preserved between various entities, allows a glimpse into local arts programming before the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967, and a sense of just how public and private entities work together to engage Americans and American teens with the arts. It further enables a deserved, if posthumous, celebration of this woman who was responsible for not only bringing this program to the air, but preserving it, Ethel Burns. Burns entered the television arena during what one might call a perfect storm of location, Broadway influence, and the rise of television. And New York City's increasing embrace of TV and radio as educational tools. Early American TV thrived in New York, with NBC, CBS, and ABC helmed in the city alongside their sister radio networks. This coincided with the national and commercial prominence of Broadway music, cast recordings, and scads of recorded show tune covers. Simultaneously, educational broadcasting was on the rise, with an Apex radio license granted to the City of New York Board of Education of New York City, for NCNY, later WNYE in 1938, making it only the second Apex license granted, coming after only Cleveland's WBOE. Located at Brooklyn's Technical High School and converted to FM in 1941, the station was known as New York's High School of the Air, and served as a locale for developing programming for integration into classrooms and beyond. The 62-63 annual report of the Bureau of Radio and Television Education for the New York City Board of Education Broadcast Services provides useful contextualization for New York public schools and Burns as American musical theater launched. The nearly 500% jump in television receivers in schools in particular helps to illustrate the increasing engagement with TV on the part of New York's public schools. Burns, a graduate of Juilliard and Columbia University, taught music at Brooklyn's Boys High School from 1938 to 1954, and served as the assistant conductor for the All-City High School Chorus from 1938 to 1953. Taking a job at WNYE in 1950, she ultimately served as the station's music supervisor, placed in charge of all musical programming for TV and radio, creating educational radio shows like Let's All Sing Together, Songs to Share, and Let's Make Music. An untitled document found within the Burns papers states that the success of Young Audiences, another show, a WCBS music series for kids produced in cooperation with the Board of Ed, with Burns as assistant producer for the board, made the station eager to continue its association with the board. Subsequently, Ned Kramer, director of public affairs, Peter J. Wolowski, director of music for the board, Cecile Suffern, program supervisor for the Bureau of Radio and TV, and Burns met to discuss future collaborations. Suffern, with whom Burns had created the show It's Fun to Sing, told the New York Times in 1998 that Burns had heard that WCBS needed to, quote, do some public service on the stations it owned, and they wanted somebody to do a music series. According to Suffern, the idea of American musical theater was born then and there, and Burns became the show's associate producer for the board. Burns arguably served as the primary force behind constructing a televised presentation of Broadway more intimate and informative than Ed Sullivan or other televised variety that dabbled in the musical. The show went on to air in New York, select owned and operated CBS stations such as KMOX St. Louis, KNXT LA, WBBM Chicago, and WCAU Philly, as well as the Eastern Educational Network and Canada, Japan, Australia, and England as part of international arts exchange programs. Between 1959 and 1965, the show aired nearly 240 episodes, almost 100 more than those who discovered the Burns collection believed and had been produced when they spoke to the New York Times. Going through the Burns collection piece by piece has helped construct a much clearer vision of exactly what aired over its 6 seasons beyond the episodes at Paley. The episodes available provide a general sense of the two series, stages of development. The first, covering early influences on the American musical with episodes on broad topics such as European influences, operettas, revues, and musical comedies of the 20s. This is the opening to that one.
The American Musical Theater, an informal music workshop in a series of programs tracing the origin, the development, the contribution of the American musical theater as a native art, with students from the New York City high schools.
Yeah, they are. So after running into the present, the series shifted to a kind of inside the actor's studio format, featuring book writers, composers, producers, directors, and actors of Broadway, and a smattering of opera, film, and other musical adjacent figures. Let me go. Is that the same one?
The American Musical Theater, an informal...
This is the other one.
The American Musical Theater, an informal workshop in a series of television biographies of people whose personal contribution to the musical theater has made it a native American art. With Erwin Kostel and the CBS Orchestra. With guest Stephen Sondheim.
He looks like a baby. So I hope you could hear that. Both versions included folks stopping by the studio to talk to an integrated high school age studio audience, sharing performances and chatting with the kids through a structured and largely pre-constructed Q&A session. The latter incarnation simply focused more on the career of the guest or guests for the week. Paley has on hand episodes featuring John Bubbles, Carol Channing, A.J. Lerner with Richard Burton and Edward Mulhare, a tribute to Richard Rodgers, Hollywood blacklister Elmer Bernstein, the only known recording of Fosse and Verdon dancing to Steam Heat together, Harry Belafonte, and the list goes on. These episodes provide rare glimpses of musical women such as Verdon, Channing, Reading Wilson, who appeared alongside husband Meredith and performs My Wish from his then running Here's Love, 110 in the Shade star Inga Swenson, chatting alongside the show's lyricist and composer and performing Simple Little Things, and Is It Really Me? And Scandinavian musical star Ulla Salert, singing a bit from My Fair Lady in Swedish, and numbers from Benjamin Franklin in Paris, in which she was appearing alongside Robert Preston. Here's a bit of Channing just being super Channing. Oh, no, that's not the direction you're supposed to go. Oh, is there a way to turn it up? Because that had sound. It doesn't exist out of the presentation. Oh, I can, hold on. I can go here. Okay, let me see if I can find this. Where are you, Carol? Wait a minute. Oh. That's so odd. Hold on. slowly frisking myself. Let me see if I can make her loud here. Hold on. Because it's awesome. Okay. Except I just...
I always wanted to do comedy since the 4th grade, because in the 4th grade...
Oh, you're so smart.
Principal telling them to vote for Carol, and then Gracie Allen... I always wanted to do comedy since the 4th grade, because in the 4th grade in school, someone nominated me for secretary, and the first thing that happened was I began doing the principal, telling them to vote for Carol, and then Gracie Allen telling them to go to the polls and vote for Carol. At the time, you know, it was Mae West, Stephen Fetchit, and all those people. So I was all these people, and the first laugh I heard, I thought, oh, this is for me. I love this, you know. And I thought, well, what I lie in bed at night and giggle about and can't contain myself about, that the teacher said to the class, like our social science teacher, Miss Weaver, would say, children, never again do I want to hear all this noise. And I think, oh, how funny she is and everything, you know. And then who are you over at the pencil sharpener all the time, over at the pencil sharpener? And I thought, oh, she's hilarious. And I'd laugh, and then I found out that other people thought it was funny too, my fellow students. Well, this is the most remarkable feeling of communication, to have someone laugh at the same things you're laughing at. You find out you're a part of the whole human race. It's the most wonderful feeling.
Okay. So hopefully you could kind of hear that. She's so, that one part's on YouTube. She's amazing. It's so, and she's got that hat on, and what's up with that? Let's see if I can get back here. Okay, nope. Okay. But then there's the what's missing portion of the story. From what I can glean of the 236 episodes, 52 can be found at Paley, but 131 were ordered to be erased by WCBS, an act from the view of this historian and fan of the musical that seems like pure blasphemy. A 1965 memo from John O'Donnell at CBS TV, received not quite 8 months after the show's final episode, includes a 3-page list of episodes Burns was asked to, quote unquote, kindly arrange to erase, unquote, and the tape credit she would expect for erasure. Separate memos note a $15 a month storage fee for each tape. Economic pressures, coupled with an apparent lack of perceived future value for local arts programming like American Musical Theater, ultimately resulted in large-scale dumping of materials which could have preserved arts history. Don't talk to me, Carol. You've already let me down. There you go. Part of this loss includes the work of women such as Agnes DeMille in an episode with highlights from Oklahoma, Carousel, South Pacific, and The King and I, which is missing. Future Oscar winner Eileen Brennan in an episode focusing on off-Broadway revivals and performing a number from Little Mary Sunshine, erased. Dorothy Fields discussing highlights of her career, erased. Betty Comden with Adolph Green and Julie Stein discussing Do Re Mi, erased. Austrian-American cabaret singer Greta Keller singing show tunes in 3 different languages, erased. First Lady of Yiddish Theater Molly Picone, performing numbers from Milk and Honey, erased. And multiple episodes with Cheetah Rivera, one on Shoestring Review and another joined by Nancy Dussault featuring numbers from Bajor, both erased, and so on. Even if the shows in question managed to be preserved via cast recordings, the episodes could have provided visual record of performances, as well as otherwise obscured insight into the past, present, and approaches of these women of musical theater from interviews and Q&A sessions. Back to Burns. Her invaluable and relentless participation continuously comes through when sifting through the files from her attic. Burns is recognized as the primary WNYE rep working on the show from its launch. A letter from the superintendent of schools, John J. Thiebold, to WCBS VP and GM Frank Shakespeare Jr.
from 1959 positions Burns as the Board of Ed's liaison and notes is that she was to be credited as, quote, associate producer for the Board of Education, unquote, on every episode. It went on to state that all contacts with the school and other agencies of the board would be made through Burns, and she should receive a quote-unquote reasonable honorarium from WCBS TV to compensate her for her work in connection with the series, which must be done in hours other than those of regular assignment to WNYE, unquote. Various memos from WCBS request Burns be paid honorariums of between $100 and $150 a week for, quote, her services or, quote, research and program planning. About 1 year into production, Burns sent a memo to Director of Programming Larry Paulus in defense of a memo he had received questioning Burns' expenditures, particularly phone calls made outside of CBS studios. Burns details the process of bringing an episode together, making calls to at least 70 students per week to find 35 available to sit in the studio, making such calls from her home during her so-called free time because students were often not home until 6:30 and because she was often too busy when at CBS, and needing to make, quote, innumerable calls to arrange for the appearance of just one guest, unquote. Paulus later told the New York Times that Burns, quote, could call anyone and they would be ready in 10 minutes, unquote. Burns was recognized as the fire behind American musical theater by many at WCBS and the Board of Ed. In May of 1960, WNYE's acting director of broadcasting, Dorothy Clock, sent a letter to Thebold celebrating American musical theater's first Emmy Award and crediting Burns with conceiving of the idea and serving as a, quote, guiding light in the production of every program, unquote. She credits Burns with selecting the music to be highlighted, the artistic talent, and the students. Clock wrote him again in July, informing him that Burns was taking no vacation that summer and points to her tireless efforts and tendency to work 6 to 7 days a week to mount the weekly show. In September of that year, Burns received a letter from Thebold sending his thanks and appreciation. A 1961 memo from Clock states that Burns would be compensated with vacation days during the school year for each weekday she had worked during the summer. A letter to Burns from Richard Lewine, am I saying that right? Television producer and composer, perhaps known best for producing Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella and Streisand's televised My Name is Barbara, reads, quote, in my checkered career in television, I have never seen such dedication or intelligence applied to a program. There can't be one bit of mystery about the show's long life and its popularity. It certainly all stems from the way you, and especially you, singular you, go about it, and you should be very proud of yourself. After the 1998 New York Times article appeared, Glenn Jordan, who had worked with Burns at CBS, wrote to Klain stating, quote, Ethel was a little red-haired dynamo that was able to produce the most interesting shows on a shoestring. She was so dogged and persistent that she could persuade performers to participate for practically no money. Her enthusiasm for and knowledge of the popular musical theater was limitless, unquote. Perhaps unshockingly for a woman in the early 1960s, Burns also had to fight to earn her props. In a 1962 letter to Ned Kramer, she pushed against the release of a bio for the show's original host, Jim Morse, set to be sent out with the tapes to their O&O markets. She emphatically rejected the framing of Morse as the implied creator and power behind the series, decrying, quote, it was not Mr. Morse who thought of the series, who thought the series was long overdue. It was I who thought so, unquote. And, quote, Elmer Bernstein flew into New York at my specific invitation. So did other West Coast guests, unquote. She went on, quote, I need not tell you, Ned, how this series was originated since you were so actively engaged in launching it. Certainly you, as well as I, know that it was not Jim Morse who conceived of the idea for the series. It was not Jim Morse who prepared the continuity for each of the programs in every stage of the series. And it was not Jim Morse who served as associate producer on more than 2 years of the series that has been on. It was I, unquote. She continued, quote, I would not ordinarily pat myself on the back in this fashion, but the release has angered me, unquote, as she went on to call the bio a, quote, completely fallacious representation, unquote. Up top, Ethel. All in all, Burns worked on American musical theater until its end, with the show garnering 3 consecutive local Emmy Awards and 1 Ohio State Award for Educational Programming. She continued to work with WCBS until 1972, working on shows such as Dial M for Music and Around the Corner. It seems Burns was unceremoniously let go from WCBS in 1972. In a draft response to those at the station who alerted her of her abrupt firing, she detailed the time she gave, series she worked on, and awards she earned for the station. She said, quote, I did all of this and more because I believed firmly in the worth of what I was doing. I believed in integrity, in ideals, in devotion to quality. I believed in the CBS image and in fostering that image. Over the years, people warned me about exploitation, but I considered them cynics. Now I begin to feel they were right, unquote. She went on to muse about the future of CBS educational programming, stating that those whose visions were left to be followed were, quote, some petty, ambitious people who are more in the image of what makes Sammy run than in the image of what was once a Camelot, unquote. Right? What this collection makes clear is that Burns was a force, and through her vision, drive, and maybe a little bit of hoarding, she helped preserve a unique glimpse of musical theater and the figures who defined it. Caroline Frick, founder and executive director of the Texas Archive of the Moving Image, argues that collections of this sort remain not because they were housed in the archive, quote unquote, but have been salvaged by a stakeholder's interest and legacy, the product and detritus of a life and profession lived in a very real material sense. I cannot think of any more relevant way to describe this treasure trove. What remains of American musical theater remains because of the sweat and care of Burns and the unyielding search of Klein. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this insightful paper. I have a quick question to start, which is, was there any kind of logic to which episodes were erased? And was it gendered in any way? Did it have to do with canonicity?
I was making notes to myself earlier today of things that I need to figure out, and that is one of them. But it seems, I think one of the Sondheims has been deleted. It doesn't seem like some of them, it seems like, okay, well, I have no idea but who am I? There are some that it seems like, okay, that doesn't seem that whatever, but there are also a number of them that, why would you choose that? And there are certain ones that Burns specifically said that she sent a note back to someone that said, hold this. And there are some that say, send to NYU, but there's no evidence of anything at NYU. And some that were said to be deleted, there are like a couple that were on the erase list that are at Paley. Most of it seems to match up. The majority of what Paley has are not on either of those lists. I don't know that it seemed particularly gendered. And a number of the times where there are women on the show, there are men joining them. But as a whole, whether we're looking at it along gender lines or otherwise, it's a travesty of what has been erased or what has been lost, whether it was in a flood or otherwise.
Other questions? Yeah, Stacy.
Kelly, this is just phenomenal work. It's so great. It's so fascinating. It's so complicated and amazing. So I'm sure I'm not the only one here who's thinking back to the beginning of the day and Sylvia Fine's work. And the thing that got me looking back on my notes from Megan's paper was where they say when they're introducing the show about the native art, our native art form, and how Megan quoted Sylvia Fine called it our only indigenous art form. So I guess I'm curious just about how the two of you, I'm not sure if Megan's still here, think about these two women who came from very different backgrounds but clearly had similar kinds of passion projects. It seems like the tone of these two shows was different, and also they were very different moments in musical theater history, and yet they're also both drawing on something specifically American, which I assume is trying to give more value to the America versus Europe and what really counts as art. So discuss.
Well, in the notes that I was taking when that paper was being presented were things like, one, like, oh, is that what happens when you have your husband's name behind you? Yes. Yes. She was a spinster school teacher. I say it with sarcasm, but who this is an interracial musical group that she also organized and toured with called the Melody Men. I think she had pulled them out of high school choir. And then I think she kind of had kind of a spiral in terms of, but that letter that I found of her, and I don't know who she wrote it to. I can't swear that she sent it. The one after she was fired is amazing. But I was thinking, is this what happens when you can't say I'm Mrs. Danny Kaye? And I was also thinking with regard to the other, since they did 3 of them, but not the rest of them, does that, what would have happened if that was a few years later? Because what year were those?
79 was the first one, and then through 85.
Oh, and it's right at that moment of Arts Cable that then implodes within 5 seconds, because they're like, oh, maybe people don't want to watch this. Yeah. But I mean, I think each special had much. I'm sure it cost more. It had more gravitas behind it, where these are just, there's a Sammy Davis Jr. episode when he was doing Golden Boy. It's him and who wrote Golden Boy? It's he and Strauss are there, and he had said he wasn't going to sing because he had a show that night, and then they got talking to the kids about something. He's like, oh, just wait. And then Strauss goes,
and they call it a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And I read in something recently that they hooked kids up with tickets to shows. They can't remember if it was that they wrote them letters of recommendation or wrote them letters of recommendation or helped them get jobs or what. But there did seem to it was important to the Board of Education that the kids stay central to this. I can't remember if it was in the letter going to the O&Os or what it was, where the kids were really dropped out of the narrative about the show, and the school board really pushed against it. It's like, no, which is why for me it seems like an early day inside the actor's studio, that they come, they talk about their career. The questions are already kind of set in stone. The collection had scripts for a lot of the episodes, some of them that have been deleted. There are the promotional releases for a good portion of the episode. It's like an amazing collection of stuff that's completely unorganized. There's some stuff at the Performing Arts Library, but there is more of it in this collection, which has yet to really go someplace. But I got to hang out with it. So.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Our next presenter is Adrienne McLean, who has been Professor of Film Studies at the University of Texas at Dallas for almost 27 years, with an MFA in Dance Studies and a combined PhD in Film Studies and American Studies. Much of her research and writing has focused on topics connected to dance in Hollywood cinema. In addition to numerous articles and book chapters, her books include Being Rita Hayworth, Labor, Identity, and Hollywood Stardom, and Dying Swans and Madmen, Ballet, the Body, and Narrative Cinema. She's currently working on a monograph centered on Eleanor Powell and other women dancer choreographers in studio-era Hollywood.
Thank you. So the project is about several women, dancer choreographers, as I call them, some of whom you may never have heard of, such as Dixie Dunbar and Eleanor Whitney. I need to move this because I'm left-handed. Today's focus, has anybody heard of Dixie Dunbar and Eleanor Whitney?
I love Dixie Dunbar. Okay. There's a girl in Berkeley who loves like her, actually.
Today's focus is the comparatively more famous Eleanor Powell, although many, if not most, of my remarks can be applied to the other women's now far more obscure film work as well. From 1936 through 1943, Powell was an MGM star immediately regarded by critics and fans as a feminine Fred Astaire. Indeed, Powell, like the other women, was lured to Hollywood from Broadway specifically because studios were looking for femme Astaires, ironically because of women's dominance as solo and group dancers in theatrical entertainment at the time. By 1935, of course, Astaire had starred in 3 RKO films with Ginger Rogers, after appearing as a specialty at MGM in 1933 as himself, and Powell would soon make her star debut in MGM's Broadway Melody of 1936, which was released at roughly the same time as the Astaire Rogers Top Hat. The important point is that while the women danced with partners from time to time, as opposed to the far stronger linking of Astaire with Rogers in 9 musicals through the end of the 30s, the women themselves were the main dance attractions of their films. To be clear, Powell is not ignored altogether in studies of the film musical, but when she is discussed, it has tended to be as a spectacular but outdated anomaly, a relic of a dead style, namely tap. For critics and scholars since, in other words, it has proven difficult to see Hollywood's dancing women as serious artists, even though, as black dancer Fayard Nicholas remarked of his friend Powell several times in the late 1990s, quote, "Some say she was the world's greatest female dancer, but I say she's the world's greatest dancer. She's better than everybody," end quote. Of course, Astaire is not just to us a dancer. As was widely publicized from his Hollywood debut, he choreographed, or in the parlance of the day conceived or created, his own dances. Well, so did all of his feminine counterparts. Audiences learned he was a hard, even obsessive worker who required extensive rehearsal time to perfect his routines. So were all of these women. We have long known that Astaire exerted substantial control over elements like shot length, camera placement, music, and editing in his numbers. So did Eleanor Powell, if not the others. In other words, the 1930s was not just the Fred and Ginger era in terms of actual screen dancing. Busby Berkeley was never much interested in dance as such, as we know, or even of dance's popularity, for the films of Powell rivaled Astaire's, especially his films without Rogers, into the early 1940s. In fact, it is not too much to say that the pre-war long 1930s was a kind of golden age for women as screen dancer choreographers, even if that term was not used in Hollywood until a decade later, and then for Tamara Jeva in 1946 and not Jean Kelly in 1951, as is often claimed. Yet at the same time, and what differentiates the women from Astaire, the focus is always on their faces and bodies. We never see Astaire in a tight swimsuit or a cheesecake pose, do we? Probably just as well. Fashion, then, as the visual adherence to current styles and ideals of beauty or glamour, has also affected their reputations as artists. Indeed, when I cringe at some of Powell's numbers, it's usually because of their extreme deployment of the tropes of femininity and spectacle, or femininity as spectacle, especially in costuming. The men, however, usually look classic. And here are some comparisons by date of Astaire and the costuming of Eleanor Powell. Although Gene Kelly likes to get a little frisky from time to time as well. Steve Cohan's work on Astaire's alternative masculinity, enacted through the dialectic in Astaire's performances between feminizing gestures and athletic feats, can help us to think about Powell in particular as representing an alternative kind of femininity, one based in extreme competence and physical prowess, as well as spangles and beauty makeup. Powell, like all the other women who dance like men, which was their own, to paraphrase the women themselves and Astaire, also embodies what Cohan calls a double aspect of the body through its simultaneous theatricalization and naturalization, reminding us that the narrative motivation or content of a number can be overwhelmed expressively by a performer's personal style. Unfortunately, most Hollywood women, even Powell, were always already marked by their femininity first, as it were. Weeks before most readers would have had a chance to evaluate Powell in her first starring role in Broadway Melody of 1936, Photoplay labeled her an ugly duckling, whose sheer ugliness, direct quote, was corrected by Hollywood, the beautifying processes she underwent laid out in bizarre and often incorrect detail. No mention, of course, is ever made of Astaire's being mostly bald, because he was lucky to have made his first film 2 years after the invention of the hair lace wig in Hollywood itself, nor does he appear in, and here's Gene Kelly with his hair lace, and here are a bunch of Gene Kelly's wigs from MGM, from an auction catalog, and there's bald Gene. Nor does he have to appear in beauty and fashion spreads that have no relation to his screen work. Nor does he have to explain what he's given up or has lost in the service of his career the way Powell did, because he had a lovely wife and children at home. For all the women, especially Powell, the lack of romance and marriage was the price they paid for their careers, even as those careers were also represented as successful and fulfilling. Nor did Astaire face obsolescence simply because he was middle-aged and then old. Notice how he's a dancing Romeo, a dancing Meteor, and so on. When MGM lost interest in Powell, she was younger than Astaire was when he made his very first film in 1933. She was also younger than Gene Kelly. Finally, all of the women's star vehicles were shot in black and white. I would love to know what Powell's reputation would be now had Born to Dance, Rosalie, or any of her 3 Broadway melodies been rendered in the vivid technicolor that became a hallmark of producer Arthur Freed's MGM Wonderland of the so-called integrated musical, in which both Astaire and Kelly flourished in the 1940s and 1950s. Ironically, in Powell's case, as with Astaire and later Kelly, one would also have learned from the fan and trade press that she combined ballet, tap, and jazz or swing, the latter 2 terms largely synonymous, in order to break down any barriers separating one form of expressive movement from another. And while she may look like a terrible ballet dancer to us now, as Harriet Hochter does, because her line isn't stretched and her toes aren't always pointed, note that Ann Miller called Astaire's ballet technique just about the world's worst. Nevertheless, we continually refer to Astaire as an outlaw dancer, his own term for himself, because he combined different forms of dance in his numbers, adding the flexibility and spatial expansion of ballet, along with getting up in the air to the literally grounded rhythms of tap. This was part of his public image in the 1930s, but again, so was it of Powell. Moreover, neither Astaire nor Kelly ever gave up tap, and the women I've been discussing put Kelly, at least, to shame on virtually all levels involving tap technique, and in my humble opinion, at least sometimes, entertainment. To be sure, most gesture-based dance forms are unquestionably better than tap for expressing narrative states like longing or sexual frustration, as Agnes DeMille showed us with Oklahoma in 1943, but this ought not to obscure the fact that there is a lot of tap in virtually every canonical integrated musical of the late 1940s and 1950s. To return to my first point, choreography, it is true that the women only choreographed their own solos, which was expected of virtually any such performer at the time. But so did Astaire, and his solos were created with the considerable input of Hermes Pan, who also choreographed Astaire's duets with Rogers and taught her the steps. When Astaire worked with dancers like Powell, of course, the two collaborated. It is maddening that Roberta in 1935 actually lists in its credits, quote, dances arranged by Fred Astaire and assistant director Hermes Pan, end quote, though it turned out to be the last time Astaire's name had appeared in such credits until The Sky's the Limit in 1943, for which RKO gave him a, quote, dances created and staged by credit. In contrast, for the same labor, not one of the women dancer choreographers of the 1930s and 1940s received a screen credit for the dances they created and staged for themselves, not a single one. So what about the charge that Powell's numbers are repetitive precisely because they often aren't narratively motivated? She reuses signature steps, some acrobatic, some not, from number to number. Well, Gene Kelly and the entire art of classical ballet can also repeat a comparatively small vocabulary of steps over and over again. Here is Kelly doing whatever this is called in 3 films, and there are more. Yeah, there's Gene. And here he is doing his jumping over the leg thing, and we simply don't know whether MGM or spectators perhaps expected that Powell perform some of her most famous moves. She was making 1 film a year. Maybe they were indeed signature steps, like the maxi forward was for Kelly or the double flap was for Astaire. But for Kelly to say, as he did in the 1970s, that, quote, all Powell could do was tap dance and she didn't add anything to the art of dance on film, end quote, isn't true, and it's certainly graceless. Rather, no one appears ever to have worked with Powell or any dancing woman to update the narrative and aesthetic context for her numbers, even though she stated publicly that she wanted to do so, and she took an ethnographic image, always glamorized by the studio during production, in other dance forms and hired experts to teach her about them. Powell did have a run of bad luck when she was off the screen for several months in 1941 as the result of complications from gallbladder surgery, during which MGM gave many of her announced roles to Judy Garland. And when the films they put her in when she returned to work did not make as much money as earlier ones, they were happy to, cancel her contract. But imagine if MGM had lost interest in Gene Kelly after the failure of The Pirate in 1948, or Astaire after Yolanda and the Thief in 1945, not to mention earlier disappointments despite great Astaire solos like Second Chorus in 1940 or Let's Dance in 1950. With Betty Hutton. Indeed, many have argued that Astaire's last film before his retirement in 1945 been Yolanda and the Thief rather than the much more popular Blue Skies with Bing Crosby, he'd never have been invited back by the Freed unit to replace an injured Gene Kelly in Easter Parade in 1948. So in essence, I suggest that Powell's career ended for a depressingly familiar reason. She was a woman who was no longer an ingenue, no longer fresh, and rather than being nurtured in the way that Astaire and Kelly were throughout their careers, at the first sign of a reduction in her film's box office receipts, that was it. Her son claims that she retired at the age of 31 on her own volition to marry and raise a family, and I don't dispute that as such. Although the fact remains that he also complained that his mother was often gone from home in his childhood because she continued to perform on the stage. Rather, I believe that, given her love not only of dancing but of choreography and staging and orchestration, Powell really had few options in Hollywood at the time. It would have been completely demoralizing to lose the authority her stardom gave her and that MGM was already taking away. But she was second billed in most of her final films, behind Red Skelton. But about all she would be allowed to do was appear as a dance specialty, as she did a couple of times later. There are other intriguing areas of congruence in Astaire's and Kelly's careers in which they deny the importance of the women who were their contemporaries. For example, Astaire claims that he and Hermes Pan laid wooden floors over water to give their film taps the sounds they wanted. But Powell had already done that, and the press wrote about it. In 1941, for her only Freed unit musical, Lady Be Good, Powell stated publicly that she had hoped to dance with an animated cartoon character, but was told it was too expensive and complicated. So instead, she danced with a terrier. Maybe Kelly was influenced by Powell's remarks when he danced with Jerry the Mouse in Anchors Away in 1940, or a bunch of Hanna-Barbera figures in Invitation to the Dance a decade later, and danced around a trained dog doing less interesting things and living in a big way in 1947. And I ain't putting Gene Kelly up there, I'm sorry. So is it just too bad for the women that they starred in so-called tap musicals primarily, a form that became somewhat outmoded on stage and screen in the 1960s and 70s, except in revivals? Here I again turn to Steve Cohan's work because it reminds us that entertainment was the ultimate goal of all Hollywood musicals, if not all Hollywood films. We need to remember that Betty Grable and Esther Williams exceeded the popularity of both Astaire and Kelly in the 1940s and 1950s as well. Moreover, Gene Kelly, that crown prince of the royal family of the Freed unit, never acknowledged that the viability of MGM's dance musicals largely depended on how popular Eleanor Powell made them. She actually helped bring MGM out of being very close to receivership in the middle of the 30s. Or indeed how much his career at MGM rested on Powell's achievements. He forgot, if that is the right term, that the first Broadway ballet, as it were, was not in his Singin' in the Rain in 1952, but Powell dancing solo to the same music in Broadway Melody of 1936. Indeed, it can be argued that the Lucky Star ballet, in which Powell's character, you can barely see her, the sort of ghostly character gets up from her seat, and then imagines dancing in a stage ballet, is the first dream ballet in a Hollywood musical, and I should note that that's the Albertina Rash Dancers with her. Instead, in Cohan's words, Kelly subordinated the MGM musical's historical reliance on female stars in the interest of advancing his stature as a dancer choreographer, end quote. Kelly famously remarked in 1958, in his quest to remove what he saw as the taint of effeminacy from men dancers by linking dancing with athletics, quote, "Dancing is a man's business altogether, but women have taken it over." Moreover, he stated, quote, "Men are better dancers than women. Men are physically better equipped for dancing," end quote. Self-aggrandizing statements like these not only displaced Kelly's predecessors, but made a mockery of the comparative equivalence the women had enjoyed in Hollywood musicals before he ever arrived on the scene. To arc toward closure, I hope we will continue to contextualize all studio-era musicals historically so that we can be reminded that, as the Hollywood Reporter put it in 1935, quote, "First, last, and always there is Eleanor Powell. To bill her as the world's greatest tap dancer is to tell only part of the story. That girl is literally a screen sensation who makes history with this picture. She has no peer in dancing. She can act, and she has beauty of face that has freshness and charm and personality. In fact, she's a star so bright that others pale in comparison," end quote. Or to remember that, while Astaire and Rogers and Kelly are often lauded in the What the Picture Did for Me section of the trade journal Motion Picture Herald, Astaire's career at the end of the 1930s was in pretty bad shape. Of Damsel in Distress of 1936, exhibitors wrote, quote, "How we missed Ginger," end quote. And, quote, "My patrons just laughed when Fred danced in the woods. Just try to kid the farmers, this is entertainment," end quote. Kelly's famous alter ego dance in CoverGirl in 1944 was, quote, "one of the stupidest ever seen," end quote. Yolande and the Thief and the Pirate are now canonical classics as art and camp and entertainment, but exhibitors didn't have the same opinion at the time. In the case of the first, quote, "Sometimes I think these big producers, writers, and directors get together and decide it's about time we lose a little money and prestige," end quote. While the Pirate was, quote, "the poorest vehicle ever made in color by anyone. The few who came walked out cussing me," end quote. And then all right, where did I go? So, yes, the past is past, but not what we can learn from it. I know now that there were so many femme Astaires because he was the exception to the women's overall dominance during the 1930s, although at the time he was successful because he was partnered by Ginger Rogers. these women can still show us the extraordinary and entertaining things they could do when given the chance. And now I hope my video plays. It's a fan compilation from YouTube that's been up there for 7 years. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly of Powell, including the bad ballet lines, the interesting costumes, some of the repetition, but also the brilliance, the joy. She's pretty amazing. So let me see. Mention that final close-up. It was about 2:30 in the morning. She'd been there since 8 o'clock in the morning for 2 days. And yet when Hugh Forden writes his book about Arthur Freed, he had full access to Arthur Freed's papers, interviewing Arthur Freed. His comment about that was like, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Eleanor Powell lost whatever professionalism she had and left. Which is just like, he had the assistant director reports. He knows that's not the case. And that kind of just sort of snittiness really gets on my nerves.
Thank you so much. It's funny that you mentioned that close-up at the end, because in the article where she's saying, the title, I'll never dance with a stare, there was a line in there where she says, you know, women tap dancers are lucky. We have it easier than the men because they do so many close-ups on our faces, and they don't do that with the men.
Which is the absolute opposite of how I would put it. They have to keep inserting glamour close-ups of the women as though to remind the audience that they're still glamorous women and not threatening, even when they're doing these amazing things with their bodies.
Absolutely. Do we have questions from the audience? Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm trying to figure out how to word it. I really enjoyed it. I had done something looking at the discourse around musical women on television, and it was so jerky compared to the way in which men were discussed for asking for things that men would ask for as well. But when you were showing the final montage, I was feeling like a bad person because the early images, the early clips, she's older. And I think in a couple really early ones.
Oh, the Technicolor ones, yes, she's older. Those are her specialty, one from 1950 and one from 1940.
And I couldn't, yet she was still dressed, so she's all legs.
Well,
that
number starts off, she's wearing a skirt, and Van Jansen says, "You better dance for us," and she just takes it off.
And her face clearly looks older. And I was trying to think of other women of dancers of the musical who continued.
Good luck.
Right, who continued to perform as they were older. And I was thinking of Kelly in Xanadu and Astaire in Finian's Rainbow. That
when Fred Astaire makes Daddy Longlegs in 1955, I was watching it once in my living room, and a friend came in who was not a musical aficionado and was like, "What is this shit you're watching?" Pardon my French. And I said, "What do you mean? It's Daddy Longlegs with Leslie, She's a baby. He's an old man." And I'm like, that's really true. This was many years. He was, I think, 35 years older than she was, and they were a couple. So it's, gender. And the fact that we can't imagine a woman dancing old, she could have ended up like Charlotte Greenwood. She could have become a kind of dancing aunt, teacher, and she was a mentor to younger dancers. I'm finding out in all these weird places. But our inability to imagine an older dancing woman in a musical is our fault, and it's really, it's sobering.
Well, in so many of the images of her, she's in kind of where she is in long pants and, kind of baggy or long. And
partly so she can sweat without having to cut, because women, the sweat showed, and they would say, "Cut," swab it all off, powder it off, and then they would start again. So then when we valorize the long take, well, the only way a woman could do that with the Kleinert dress shield that the men, or the silk union shoots that the men wore underneath their, their suits, their long sleeves and so on, was to dress like a man. And it gave her the ease of movement that women couldn't have ordinarily. And
we could imagine that.
Yes.
We can imagine that with a woman of an older age.
Yes.
But then when we see her, they will not give her that grace.
They won't.
Which is a problematic thing to say in and of itself. I'm having a whole argument with myself. But
I know. Tell me about it.
Thank you.
Time for one.
Sid Charisse was 35 when she made Silk Stockings, and they were commenting on her age.
Are there questions from the audience? Was that a hand? Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I'm really curious about your comments about the genre of tap becoming less popular over time, and I'm also really curious about the way the dance style itself is racialized. I'm thinking about the Nichols brothers, who were contemporaries, and in fact, some of the acrobatics and some of the stage dressing we were just discussing look like some of those that are used in a number of the Nichols brothers films. And I'm curious about the degree to which you've thought about how the kind of, the long-standing racialization of tap, or the way that racialization might be working with the gender politics here at play vis-a-vis her career.
All the women, Dixie Dunbar, Eleanor Whitney, Eleanor Powell, all in public in the 30s were like the backs of their photographs. They trained with Bill Robinson, noted, colored dancer Bill Robinson. They talked all the time about the effect of black dancers on their work. Astaire did once say in the 30s that Bill Robinson was a great dancer, but he never admitted that he had worked with John Bubbles. That was actually Diana Vreeland that told us that, and he went for a private lesson with Marilyn Miller, and Bubbles named like $400 for an hour, which was outrageous, and Astaire said no problem. He never admitted until close to his death the extent to which he was influenced by black dancers. Eleanor Powell always did. She performed with Robinson in New York, supper clubs, and at private gatherings of gajillionaires, and she always rode up in the elevator with him because he wasn't allowed. She rode up in the service elevator with him. She did, I use sort of Charles Musser is quoting a historian, and I cannot remember the historian's name. He talks about cross-racial conviviality in connection with black audiences' fondness for Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer. And I have to think that way. It was a racist country. Eleanor Powell actually wrote a poem that is on file about God being colorblind, that all of his children, it doesn't matter what color, God invented all these colors, but when it comes to people, God is colorblind. So there's no way around the fact that she's a white dancer and she does a blackface number that Bill Robinson taught her to do, one of two people that he ever taught the stair dance to, and so on. And there's a great article by Robin Stilwell analyzing that number and their dancing styles. But Fred Astaire does blackface. I could show you a bunch of blackface dancing pictures from other performers. And, America's a racist country. And for Hollywood, don't forget the production code, which forbade miscegenation, which they defined as sex relations between the white and black races. But what it practically meant is no star of color, unless it's an all-black musical, in which there still is not kissing. And you may or may not know that Hollywood had a sort of ingrained, you could not, if you were a black performer, you could not look directly into the camera, because that would acknowledge your personhood to the audience. And that kind of racism, Hollywood would never have allowed a black performer to perform with a white dancer. Robinson got into some trouble himself for choosing Geneva Sawyer over Jenny Lagan when he made, I can't remember, one of his films, and he chose a white dancer who performed in blackface with him. So it's a mess. It's horrible. I don't think Eleanor Powell was racist in the sense of wanting to deny the influence of black dance forms on her work. She talks about lying on her stomach in the wings and watching black dancers perform, and then they would go down in the basement and do it all night. But it's a racist Hollywood, and it's a racist country.
Thank you so much for your paper. Looking forward to your book.
No, that's not.
Our final presenter of the day, last but certainly not least, is Hannah Lewis, Associate Professor of Musicology at the University of Texas at Austin. She is the author of French Musical Culture and the Coming of Sound Cinema, the co-editor of Voicing the Cinema, Film Music, and the Integrated Soundtrack, and most recently published a book on La La Land for Oxford's Guides to Film Musicals series.
Well, thank you everybody for sticking around till the very end today. I've really enjoyed the whole day and the panel, this very last panel. So I hope I can end on an upbeat note here a little bit. In the classic 1954 Paramount film White Christmas, Bob Wallace and Phil Davis visit a nightclub to check out an act, purportedly at the behest of their army pal. We are introduced to the Haynes sisters, Betty and Judy, through their song aptly titled Sisters.
Sisters, sisters, there were never such devoted sisters. Never had to have a chaperone, no sir. I'm here to keep my eye on her. Caring, sharing, every little thing that we are wearing. When a certain gentleman arrived from Rome, she wore the dress and I stayed home. All kinds of weather, we stick together, the same in the rain or sun. Two different faces, but in tight places, we think and we act as one.
They playfully sing about how they think and they act as one, their mirrored choreography and tight harmonies that resolve into unison, revealing just how like-minded they are. They finish the chorus with a warning to each other, "Lord, help the sister who comes between me and my man." But this is ultimately an empty threat. Indeed, as the film progresses, the Haynes sisters never compete for a man, each happily coupled with her respective romantic interest by the end of the film. The song's claim that they think and they act as one does not hold true either. Betty and Judy's contrasting modes of performance, Betty as a singer and Judy a dancer, bring their characters' personality differences into sharp relief while legitimating both female characters as viable objects of desire. In her book, A Problem Like Maria, Gender and Sexuality in the American Musical, Stacey Wolf posits that, despite the widespread understanding of the mid-century American musical as, quote, the quintessential, sentimental, nostalgic American art form, end quote, if we read, quote, against the grain, we can find feminist and queer interpretations within them. Film musical scholars have long discussed how the Hollywood musical is both one of the most culturally conservative genres when it comes to romance and gender, and how its generic markers point to the artificiality and constructedness of gender identity. In this presentation, I examine the performance of femininity in White Christmas, as represented in the roles of Betty and Judy, played by Rosemary Clooney and Vera Ellen. Informed by the scholarly approaches of Stephen Cohen, Kelly Kessler, Stacey Wolf, and others who have explored the performance of gender in the musical on stage and screen, I argue that the women in the film self-consciously present different modes of femininity, drawing upon their star power and elements of camp in their performance that subtly push against the film's own narrative fulfillment of the generic and societal post-war expectations of heterosexual coupling. Indeed, the women in White Christmas serve a multifold function as eroticized objects of desire or spectacle for the male gaze constructed for their to-be-looked-atness, a phrase coined by Laura Mulvey, as social models of post-war heterosexual womanhood, and as highly theatricalized performances marked by aesthetic excess that highlight gender's very constructedness. White Christmas follows two wartime buddies, Bob Wallace and Phil Davis, played by Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye, who after the war have become a successful entertainment duo. They meet Betty and Judy and fall in love with each sister respectively. In the meantime, they reunite with their former general, who is struggling to find his place in society following the war. All ends happily as the two performers mount a successful show to save the former general struggling in, and after some drama is resolved, each man couples with his respective love interest. As scholars such as Linda Mizajewski have argued, the narrative is driven by the tension between its sentimental nostalgia for the homosocial bonding of wartime military life and the American post-war expectations of heterosexual coupling. Indeed, White Christmas focuses on the two leading men's reluctance and eventual acceptance of abandoning their own partnership in favor of marriage. Scholarly examination of the film's gender politics has mainly focused on its construction of masculinity. Crooner Bing Crosby offered a distinct on-screen persona that Alison McCracken describes as, quote, a white masculinity that was extreme in its evacuation of emotion or desire, end quote. Yeah. This lack of affect created a paternal form of stability and security, representing conservative views of patriarchy, particularly small-town rural values. Danny Kaye, on the other hand, represented what Stephen Cohen calls a manic physicality, quote, disruptive, unpredictable, and riotous, and, as Cohen has detailed, carrying queer connotations that lay bare, quote, the instabilities of American heteromasculinity at mid-century, end quote. Indeed, Kaye is the source of much of the film's camp, which is particularly on display in the sisters' reprise. Kay and Crosby dress in partial drag and lip sync to the women's voices as Kay, who is clearly enjoying himself, becomes increasingly over the top in order to get his more uncomfortable co-star to break a smile. Linda Mizejewski argues that these kinds of moments in the film are, quote, campy resistance to post-war heterosexual hegemony, end quote. Clearly, whether we call it camp, extravagance, or stylistic excess, the film exemplifies the generic markers of the Hollywood musical and its approach to gender in such an over-the-top manner that it invites a critique of its own narrative trappings. Before turning to Clooney and Ellen's performances, it's worth noting that, even narratively, despite its backward-looking post-war nostalgia, the film already departed from its clearest predecessors, Holiday Inn and Blue Skies. White Christmas is the third of a series of films featuring the Irving Berlin songbook and written for Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire. Though White Christmas was written for Astaire, he withdrew from the project and eventually Kay replaced him. All three films narrativize the tension between careers and entertainment and the ultimate ideal of settling down into marriage and family. But there are important differences between the first two films and White Christmas, particularly regarding the female leads. As Todd Decker points out in his article on Holiday Inn, neither leading lady Marjorie Reynolds nor Virginia Dale was well known at the time, and therefore did not bring with them any established star personas. Moreover, neither female character is particularly well developed, appearing more as plot devices to enable the main narrative conflict in the film, the competition between the two men for the romantic attention and performance rights with each of the women. The wholesome Crosby, a singer who wants to settle down and marry, is pitted against the womanizing, dancing Astaire, song pitted against dance. Blue Skies similarly pits Crosby and Astaire against each other in a love triangle. The women are a source of competition, seen as potentially destabilizing threats to the men's friendship and their relationship as performers. But this kind of competition does not exist in White Christmas. Neither female lead seeks to break up the men's partnership, and both are presented as viable models of femininity in ways that both align with and subtly push against 1950s gender conventions. The fact that they are sisters creates narrative space for them to be able to express female strength and mutual support in a socially sanctioned way, much like the Sisters of Wonderful Town on Broadway the year prior, or Hamilton many decades later. Additionally, White Christmas's casting and the unique star power of Rosemary Clooney and Vera Ellen distinguish the film significantly from its predecessors. Their singing and dancing abilities seem to align so naturally with those of their male counterparts as to render any question of their suitability ridiculous. Moreover, the excessiveness of their star personas come through so clearly in certain moments that they become much more than just suitable mates. First, there is Rosemary Clooney as Betty. Biographers Ken Crossland and Malcolm McFarland call her a sweet-voiced, svelte, honey-blonde girl from Kentucky whose rags-to-riches story came to epitomize the American dream. Clooney began a career singing radio jingles with her sister, and in 1949 she signed as a solo artist with Columbia Records. Her first big hit, the novelty song Come On to My House, was released in 1951. In 1953, she made her Hollywood debut in The Stars Are Singing, and she was featured in several films, each one playing a performer, before appearing in White Christmas. Clooney's star persona was one of the wholesome, no-nonsense girl next door, but with a hint of sensuality. Crossland and McFarland suggest that her great asset in Hollywood, apart from her voice, was that she came across as wholesome, pretty without being glamorous, attractive without being sexy. That's their quote. But Phil Gentry has argued that in the post-war era, when white femininity was being renegotiated, Clooney strategically drew on ethnic and racialized difference in her performance style, enabling her to inhabit a less inhibited sexuality. This is clear in the seductive lyrics of her hit song, Come On to My House, which she performed on screen in The Stars Are Singing, even as her character seems completely wholesome outside of the recording studio. Similarly, in Here Come the Girls, she plays the earnest girlfriend of Bob Hope's character while displaying uninhibited sensuality in an onstage harem number. As Gentry suggests, quote, Clooney's career still retained just enough of that racialized difference to allow for a small window of performed sexuality, end quote. In White Christmas, Clooney brought her already established persona to bear in her new role as leading lady alongside Bing Crosby. Betty is earnest and no-nonsense, and she bristles at any hint of conniving or inauthenticity. Though perhaps a bit humorless, she is seen as the appropriate vocal and romantic match for superstar Crosby.
The two have a similar warmth and depth to their voices, and their characters possess a similar distaste for the sleaziness of show business. But Clooney shows herself to be more than just a partner for Crosby and showcases her sensuous side in her solo number, Love You Didn't Do Right By Me. With an icy stare, sequined gloves, and a deep V-cut black dress, Clooney stands statuesque as a series of Ken doll-like dancers drape themselves around her. The dancers are another clear source of the film's camp. Though they symbolize her past failed romances with an intense seriousness, it is difficult, at least today, to take them seriously. The dancers become props, the male bodies becoming objects for Betty's own manipulation, the kind of treatment we might expect if the genders were reversed. But male dancers aside, Clooney's vocal delivery and stage presence is its own form of stylistic excess. With her deep, resonant chest voice and strategic portamento, Clooney depicts an independent, formidable woman who will not take any nonsense from a man. Her nearly unbroken stare allows her to look back at the spectator. She is not just an object to be looked at, she looks back at you.
Love, you didn't do right by me. You planned a romance that just hadn't a chance, and I'm through. Love, you didn't do right by me. I'm back on the shelf and I'm blaming myself, but it's you.
Yeah, I know. Wanted to keep going, but fair use, right? Okay. In the Hollywood musical, as Susan Smith has argued, the female voice is often seen as something unruly that must be contained or controlled. But Clooney's voice is neither contained nor controlled here. It shines through and allows her sensual side, which maybe even hints at threatening the heterosexual social order, to come through, at least momentarily. She does return to the show in Vermont and to Bing Crosby's arms once she learns of his true, pure motivations for putting on the show. But even though she conventionally couples with Crosby at the end, she does so on her own terms, suggesting that the fierce independence seen in this number will not be sublimated into her presumed marriage. Judy, on the other hand, is depicted as somewhat conniving, as she schemes to pair her sister with a mate so that she is freed from Betty's protective nature. But ultimately in a way that is deemed harmless, especially since her overall goal is marriage for both her and her sister. Judy was portrayed by Vera Ellen. After making her Broadway debut in 1939 and Dancing with the Rockettes, Ellen moved to Hollywood in 1945, where she appeared in a dozen films before White Christmas. According to biographer David Soren, many considered her the greatest all-around dancer of her generation, in large part because of her versatility. She was equally comfortable dancing ballet, jazz, tap, and ballroom. And I'd love to get the take on the dance scholars in the room after. In her early films, she was depicted as a youthful, wholesome girl next door type, even as she performed virtuosic dance routines in musical numbers with a perennially dubbed singing voice. But by the end of the 1940s, she actively sought to remake her image into a more glamorous leading lady. What followed were some of her most memorable film appearances, as she danced alongside Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, and Donald O'Connor. Her characters fluctuated between the nice, wholesome girl or sister or girl next door and the sultry temptress. Sometimes she played both at once. Her role as Ivy Smith in On the Town perhaps best encapsulates these competing characteristics of her star persona. As Miss Turnstiles, she is a character who is convincingly sophisticated and glamorous enough to fool Gene Kelly into thinking she must be a famous society woman, while in reality she is just a small town girl trying to make it in the big city from the same small town as Gene Kelly's Gaby character, making her both an idealized object of desire and the perfect marriageable mate. As Judy in White Christmas, Vera Ellen perfectly embodies this naughty but nice persona, to quote a song from the Belle of New York. She schemes with Phil about coupling her sister with Bob. She throws herself at Phil as she suggests a phony engagement, which would be less forgivable if they weren't already clearly in love with each other, obvious from their immediate suitability as dancing partners within minutes after they meet. She is the dancing counterpart to Betty's singing role, and therefore the perfect match for the physicality of Danny Kaye. However, her body's virtuosity cannot be contained by her pairing with Kay. Kay was an untrained dancer, but had enough physical grace alongside his slapstick talent to be able to fake it alongside more accomplished dance partners. But Vera Ellen's graceful body and virtuosic dance so outshines Kay's that she needs a different dance partner, John Brascia, for the more virtuosic numbers. Both her body and her dancing are so uncontainable that her presence frequently overtakes the entire screen. In choreography, for instance, her legs alone literally take over the screen, eroticized objects of fascination and fear by both the man and women on screen. As a physical, primarily visual presence, Vera Ellen offers a portrayal of womanhood that is distinct from Rosemary Clooney's, but with similar tensions, wholesome and sensual, independent and ready to settle down. What's more, her physicality cannot be contained into the ideals of heterosexual coupling. It takes two, and sometimes more than two, men to match her on-screen physicality. Both women push against the expectations of white womanhood most forcefully in the minstrel scene Mandy, where racialized performance becomes the vehicle for both sexual promiscuity and elements of drag. This song was written in 1919 for the Army review Yip Yip Yapank, and also appeared in the wartime film This Is the Army in 1943. And both times the number was performed both in blackface and drag. It is therefore notable and completely unsurprising, given the long history of on-screen blackface performances that sexualize through racial difference, that the biggest performance of sexual liberation in White Christmas occurs in this number, even in the absence of literal blackface. In this song, one woman is led into a historically all-male performance space, while another is celebrated for her lack of a singular male partner. First, Rosemary Clooney plays the interlocutor, a traditionally male role in a minstrel show, alongside Crosby and Kay, allowing her to subtly perform her own form of drag, albeit while wearing an evening gown. Visually, she is set up as one of the boys, as she, Crosby, and Kay stand around to set up jokes and deliver punchlines. She takes on a slightly deeper tone in her voice, simultaneously feminizing the interlocutor and masculinizing her own girl-next-door persona. Here's a brief clip.
Mr. Bones, how do you feel, Mr. Bones? Rattling. Mr. Bones feels rattling, ha ha. That's a good one, tell a little story, Mr. Bones.
Later in the scene, Vera Ellen's body again becomes uncontainable. When she pops out of the set and descends down the stairs, her long legs becoming the visual focus yet again. Linda Mizejewski claims that, quote, the face and figure of Vera Ellen, blonde, thin, busty, wasp-waisted, long-legged, are virtually identical to those of the future icon of white womanhood, the Barbie doll, end quote. Her appearance is white female objectification idealized and highly sexualized. Yet here, her body transcends its status as object, or rather becomes so excessively objectified as to draw attention to itself. Instead, she shapes everything and everyone around her as they stop what they are doing to celebrate her. She dances as the chorus sings how there's a minister handy, but it's never pointed out whom she is intended to marry, subtly rejecting the song's own premise. Therefore, just as the minstrel show has always carried liberatory potential for its participants, as detailed by Eric Lott, Dale Cockrell, and countless others, this whitewashed minstrel number becomes the site of the most radical departure from the film's narrative containment of the two women. White Christmas embodies the tensions of gender representation inherent in the post-war American musical. These tensions are especially prominent in the Hollywood musical, which was arguably more culturally conservative than Broadway, hamstrung by Hollywood censors and studio attempts to appeal to even wider mass audiences, while it simultaneously celebrated its aesthetic excesses. In A Problem Like Maria, Stacey Wolf suggests that, quote, the mid-century American musical does not locate a woman as a passive to be looked at object, but allows her to take up the position of self-spectacle. Women in musicals look back, end quote. Indeed, as we can clearly see, Betty and Judy aren't just looked at, they look back. I'm not suggesting that White Christmas is a radically feminist film. Indeed, there are numerous ways in which the film remains conservative, even regressive by 1950s standards, and of course by today's. It is important also to emphasize how the kind of feminism latent in the film ignores all forms of intersexuality, presenting only a white, heterosexual, middle-class notion of femininity. Nevertheless, as I hope I have shown, it is worth reconsidering classic films like White Christmas for how they can subtly be both nostalgic and forward-looking, both regressive and progressive. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your fantastic paper. I was just wondering briefly about the issue of dubbed singing.
Yeah.
Because I know that she was dubbed by different women, sometimes the same ones, but often very different women. And I'm wondering if you're seeing any stylistic consistencies or inconsistencies and how that kind of manifests across her work.
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's probably a whole paper in that, I think, right? Like looking at the women who have been dubbed by countless other women's voices, right? And the fact that we kind of accept that as okay. I don't have any fully formed thoughts on that yet, but I want to think about that more. I think that's really interesting. I do think that it's an interesting choice that she's given this sort of rich, deep voice, you know, in this film, which I think sort of further like contributes to the sensuality of her character. But that's all I can say at the moment, I guess. Yeah.
No, I think that's really on point with how they conceptualize her voice for this particular role. Yeah, I think I saw Adrienne had her. Yeah.
First, if anybody in here has any connections, I want to see Hannah Waddingham and RuPaul do sisters together. So if
oh my gosh, yes.
You just work that out. But my problem with Vera Ellen is her anorexia, and she very much. I'm very uncomfortable watching her dance, and the tap dubbing is really bad too. But the other thing is she also is like so many women dancers. The costuming does not do her any favors. It's emphasizing all of the things that are most sort of painful about the way she looks. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on the anorexia itself and her excessive thinness.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's really, really bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that could be said about that, right? And I think I kind of purposely didn't bring in too much biography for these two actors because I wanted to kind of focus on their performance, but at the same time, it's hard to see it, especially now knowing what we know about her and not think about it, right? I don't know, I think also with a lot of these women who carry with them star personas, a lot of it is attached to tragedy. You know, and Rosemary Clooney, of course, as well, has this very tragic story, especially after, you know, after her fame in White Christmas. Yeah, I'm trying to read this sort of in spite of her anorexia, rather than letting that be the frame.
It's a femininity that
right.
is tied to a body that
right.
is painfully
yeah. And that's the Barbie doll kind of comment, right? It's hard not to decouple those. And I just on a kind of like a visceral level, I tend to agree with you. Her earlier films, I don't feel that, right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. If people have further thoughts on that, I think it's a complex kind of fraught issue around Vera Ellen.
I had my hand up, Hannah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful paper, and also thank you for the shout out, which is always very much appreciated. So I would love to hear you talk more about camp and whether, I mean, I know kind of the theorization of camp came way after this, but at the time, was it seen as campy and over the top, or did those readings come later? And also, how do you think about camp in conversation with a feminist reclamation of this film?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I'm still trying to untangle myself, I think. And I think the perennial question with reading camp in these films is, to what extent was that legible in the 50s, right? And I've tried to do some, little reception history, and of course the reviewers are all men, right? That's one thing. But there's very little that's actually stated about Clooney or Ellen in the reviews. It's usually one line that says they hold up their own, or whatever it might be, right? And it's all about Crosby and Kay, which is really disappointing. Yeah, I mean, I never quite fully commit to the camp framework, because I still haven't decided if that's the best way to kind of read this, and whether women in the 50s would have kind of latched on to the excesses here and read it in the way that I'm trying to read it or not. So again, this is very early stages thinking, so I welcome any thoughts on that and the usefulness or not of camp as a framework, and other frameworks that we might consider too. Yeah.
One last question.
I think this is a camp piggyback.
Yes.
I always kind of read these sisters as closeted. Is that just me? But I think it's because of the camp, like in the scene with all the men, the beautiful dancing men in black turtlenecks. I don't know. And I kind of felt the same way about the they're doing choreography. It's which they're like totally, I think, making fun of modern women in modern dance, which is an interesting misogynist situation, but there's also a very interesting queer aesthetic to the camp of that scene. So I'd be really curious to hear any of your like thoughts. You said something about, blah blah blah, it's not quite a heterosexual situation here, and love, you didn't do right by me. And I'm wondering if you're thinking about that because of the multiplicity of partners, and like the kind of way in which a woman is seemingly paired with a number of men. But also, interestingly, we don't like see their faces. The whole musical, they're all facing that whole number. We see a lot of butt, a lot of butts and black pants, and then like really nice profiles.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, what are you thinking about that it's not quite heterosexual, and what, even if it's not camp, what valences are you reading there?
Yeah, I mean, that number is just so, like laden with so many different contradicting meanings, I think. And the number, the song itself is rejecting the notion of having to be with a man in a way, right? Like this failed romance. My one love affair didn't get anywhere from the start, right? So I'm done with love. I think we could read it in that. I don't think it's that much of a leap to read it the way you're sort of suggesting. Basically, I think yes, and right? There's like definitely a different number of different ways we could read this that reject the premise of monogamous heterosexual coupling at the end, I guess.
It's kind of like Judy Garland, the great lady, gives an interview in Ziegfeld Follies, like a comic version. This is the melodramatic version, where the men have no interest in her much either. They're just sort of there as props. But they're more engaged with each other than they are with the woman.
Yeah.
There's so much of Vera Ellen's crotch.
Yeah.
My male cousin was so upset because he said you could drive a truck through her legs at the top. It is a lot of crotch.
Busby Berkeley always gives us a lot of crotch.
Yeah.
Right. No, this is like her legs are apart and then the crotch is there.
Well, in one costume looks like a cod piece. There's one shot that you did the still up was like up her breast. Sorry.
What a note to finish on for the day. Not where I thought we would be. But thank you all for being here. Thank you so much to Hannah for